All countries in the world have debts in different forms. America's debt has exceeded $38 trillion. The European Union, Japan, China, Germany, many of them are deeply in debt. Even countries that became rich through oil and whose income depends on it are in the same situation. At this point, the same question comes to all of our minds. If everyone is in debt, who will ultimately pay the price of all this debt? At first glance, a structure that looks complex from the outside appears. Debt was taught to us as something bad, a burden, a chain, an irreversible swamp. But the truth is this: all countries survive on debt. Wars, crises, periods of growth, all of them take place on top of this invisible web of debt. When we examine debt relationships more closely, we encounter something surprising. Countries are not actually indebted to a single entity, or even directly to each other. The world is in debt to itself. But this does not mean that everyone shares the same conditions. Today, total global debt has exceeded $315 trillion. This corresponds to nearly 3 times everything the planet produces in a single year. So how did we get here? At the core of this system are not banks or credit cards, but wars. In 1694, England was at war with France, and the state treasury was depleted. The king then went to merchants and said, "Lend me money now, and I will pay you regular interest in the future." To keep the system alive, the Bank of England was established. What seemed like a small step at the time actually changed the world fundamentally. The state began spending money it did not have. In return, it offered lenders something extremely powerful: the promise of the state. This promise could be bought and sold, transferred from hand to hand. This is how government bonds came into existence. Over time, this system spread rapidly. France adopted it, the Netherlands pushed it further, and America sustained its revolution through these debts. Debt was no longer a sign of weakness, but a symbol of strength. If you could borrow, it meant you were trusted. Once, empires conquered lands in pursuit of gold. Today, they issue bonds to earn interest. Wars are no longer fought on maps, but on balance sheets. When we look at today, the picture becomes even more striking. Everyone is in debt, but at the same time, everyone also has a claim. Most of America's debt is owed to Americans themselves: banks, pension funds, investment funds. Does America owe China? Yes, but not as much as commonly believed. Only a small portion of total debt. So, money leaves one point and eventually circulates back into the same system. You pay taxes, that money is used to pay interest. The interest flows into pension funds, and the cycle is complete. This picture is not unique to America. Japan lends to America. America lends to Europe. Europe lends to developing countries, and they in turn invest their money back into Western bonds. Everyone seems to be borrowing from everyone else, but no one leaves the table, because if one player gets up, the game ends right there. The real decision makers in this game are the markets, funds, banks, central banks. If they trust a country, interest rates fall. If trust is lost, the economy shakes. Central banks are the heart of this system. When they buy a bond, new money is created within the system. That means every banknote we carry in our pockets is backed by a debt somewhere. There is no such thing as money without debt. This system has survived for years thanks to one thing: trust. No one expects governments to fully pay off their debts. The only expectation is that interest will be paid, and the debt will be continuously rolled over. In fact, governments have no plan to fully eliminate debt. This is not hidden. The system openly works this way. Because if all debts were paid off, the system would collapse. Bonds would disappear, the money supply would shrink and the economy would freeze. That's why debts constantly change hands, almost like a subscription system. The real issue is this: the system does not work the same way for everyone. Interest payments mostly flow upward, from workers, from taxpayers, to those who hold the debt. As debt grows, inequality grows with it. And one day, if new debts can no longer cover old promises, that is when what debt truly is will be remembered. At the top of the system there is no single person to blame. Not China, not America, not the banks. We are all part of this cycle. Once debt meant enslavement. Today it represents balance. But if that balance breaks, its true face will emerge once again.